Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar, the first of the spring semester. We are very excited to have all of you here today. I did want to give a shout out to YouthWorks and ACE Charter and ASU Poly Prep. And we also have Santa Cruz County joining us today. So we're really excited to have you as part of this experience. We are JA Inspire of Arizona, and I am Cindy Ballantyne, an education manager here at the Inspire program. And I wanted to mention before our speaker gets started today that we do have the live Q&A feature available. So as you are listening to the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to post those using the live Q&A feature. And our presenter will be answering those the last 10 minutes of this experience. All right, we are excited to have you here, and we're most excited to have our speaker today, Jamie Valderrama. She is a former colleague, great friend, and an expert on everything about mindfulness. And she will be talking today about the magic of mindfulness. Take it away, Jamie.
Thank you so very much. And thank all of you for being on here. For me, this is like that ultimate pay it forward when I have an opportunity to get to share some of my expertise and hopefully provide some tools that help you as you're moving forward. So as we get ready to go, it's called the magic of mindfulness, because really this is almost in a way a superpower, and it's how we really can become responsive in our lives. So I know that Cindy introduced me, but I am not just this random person off of the street, right? So, oh wait, maybe not. Let's see. Maybe I am a random person off the street. No, I'm not. We're going to get it. Okay, good. We're good to go. So again, Jamie Valderrama, I'm a full-time faculty at ASU, but I was a teacher. I taught for over 12 years. I taught high school biology, anatomy, physiology, zoology. I did student council, so I called that funology. And I really, really love this idea of like, how can we step back? How do we self-regulate so that when we hit hard moments in life, which we're going to hit hard moments in life, that's just part of it, that we have these really responsive behaviors, and we really can train the brain, called neuroplasticity, to look at challenges as opportunities for growth versus hindrances. So like I said, I taught for over 12 years. I finished up my graduate work at ASU. I was recruited. I now run the Integrative Health Initiative program there. And I love it because I get to marry together psychology and physiology. My undergrad's in biology, my graduate work's in integrative health modalities. And so for me, this is like the ultimate class I get to teach, our stress management courses. And to give you an idea of how popular they are, this semester alone, I have close to 50 sections of these courses on all 4 campuses, online, on ground, and all different majors, which I really love, because when I walk into one of my lecture halls, I'll have engineers and business majors and education and criminology and social work, and they all come in and they're like, "You're stressed too?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I love that, because what we realize is that stress isn't a bad thing. In fact, I don't ever want you to think about stress being bad, because stress can be really, really good for us. It just becomes detrimental when it controls us and we're not controlling it. So let's jump into this. And just like Cindy said, this is so informal, my friends. Anytime you have a question, just put it in there. Even if you're like, I don't know if I believe this, or I think this is a bunch of hoo-ha, that's totally cool, because this is your opportunity to kind of break through maybe some of the mysticism or maybe some of the myths that you've heard about when we talk about what mindfulness is. So what's the connection? Like, you're like, why am I here? Why do I need to know this? Well, what we're recognizing through the data is that really effective leaders are inherently mindful. And that means that they're here in this moment, they're paying attention, they're aware of what's going on. And we see this now across the board professionally. We're seeing it in medical. In fact, I do a lot of speaking for emergency room doctors and nurses, especially after the pandemic. There was a lot of stress there. We see it in our first responders. Again, a first responder like a policeman, military, firefighter, they're really good in a crisis, but sometimes those days and weeks and months after can be really trying. And so I actually have a program in Homeland Security that I teach. And we see this again, like I said, integrated within all of these different first responders' careers, that they're actually starting to do mindfulness activities to self-regulate. We see it in education. We see it in business. And it's interesting because when I first started this years ago, we just didn't have a lot of data, but now we do. The heavy hitting universities are all producing data. In fact, the #1 class at Harvard right now is a happiness class, same at Ohio State. we're realizing the simple act of training the brain to see the world a little differently. It's incredibly powerful personally and professionally. So I want you to think about this as we're going through this just brief little lecture. Are you mindful or is your mind full? I know it's like really deep, right? Like you had no idea we're going to get this deep into it. But that's really, you have to be self-reflective and you have to be willing to look inside. I had a student once say to me, this was the easiest class I've taken at ASU, and this is the hardest class I've taken at ASU. It's the easiest class because it was all about me. It was the hardest class because it was all about me. You know, the thing is, we can be our greatest advocates in life, but we also can be our greatest hindrances or blockages. And so it's really important that we're willing to look inside at both the light and the dark. And in fact, if you woke up this morning and you felt great, I have no doubt you'd say, oh, I feel really good. I woke up, I'm excited, I'm happy. But how often will we wake up if we're feeling anxious or depressed, that we're like, I'm feeling anxious and depressed. This is great. Like, no, we don't do that. We don't like those emotions. So we try to push them away. We try to deflect them or numb them. But the data shows us that we can't have what we perceive are positive emotions like happiness and excitement without also acknowledging what we perceive are challenging emotions. They're all part of who you are and they're all very valid. So we need to make sure that we respect all of them. So you're like, what is this magical word, Jamie? Mindfulness. It just means that you're here and now. It means that even in this brief time that we've been talking, that you're not having thoughts or storylines about the past or the future. And the thing is, it's interesting is that that's the way our brains are wired. Of course, we have thoughts. We always are having thoughts. And so mindfulness is when we can catch our thoughts before they become a storyline, that we're really just in this moment and we don't have an expectation of how we think the moment should go. We're just paying attention to it. And that really allows us to be objective and decide how we want to move forward versus when we put a label on it or an expectation. So why is this important? Well, a study out of Harvard showed that the average American is lost in thought 47% of their day. That's almost half of their day that you're lost in thought. So where are you? Well, for some of us, when it gets really quiet, where you're not engaged in your schoolwork or talking to someone, your brain does something called rumination. And it means that you start thinking about past events. It can be current, it could be something that just currently happened, like you got in a fight with your friend, or it could be something long term that was really hard for you. But if this is you, every time you sit down and you start thinking about these past memories that are triggering for you, or they induce some trauma or some stress, what you're doing is you're creating this storyline. You're reinforcing these neural connections to constantly default into a ruminative state, which clinically we know can lead to depression. It's almost like you go to the gym and the only exercise you do at the gym are bicep curls. If all you do are bicep curls, you get really strong biceps. And so this is the same thing if you're ruminating. If you constantly ruminate, you've trained the brain through neural connections to default into this pattern of going to the past. And it's almost like you're revisiting a car accident. You can't change the fact that the car accident occurred, yet you keep going back to the trauma of it. So again, what mindfulness will help you do is become aware, are you doing this? Now here, I could know some of you are like, okay, Jamie, I get it. Ruminations, thinking about the past, it can clinically lead to depression. But I don't do that. I think about the future. I play the what if game. What if I taste weird? Look at this poor cup of tea. What if I'm too cold? What if I'm too hot? What if I'm just right and I can never live it up to it again? Right. And so the what if game, and I know a lot of us do this. What if I can't pass this class? What if this doesn't work out with my family? What if we don't have enough money to pay for these bills? When we play this, it can induce anxiety. Now, I want to really make sure you understand it is not bad to think about the past or the future. In fact, we really need to. We need to think about the past to learn and grow. And we need to think about the future in order to plan. We just don't want them controlling us. We want to control them. So the what if game, again, is one of those things that if you have a lot of anxiety or a lot of worry, you might be doing this quite a bit every time you sit down. Instead of doing those biceps that we talked about, which could be rumination, you're doing triceps. All you do is go to the gym and you work your triceps. So you get these really powerful neural connections to projection. Now it's interesting. This is a perfect story of projection. I had a student a few years ago, came in first day of class, came from a math class and sitting with another student in the very front row, and they're looking at the syllabus. And one student says to the other, wow, do you know there are only 3 tests in this class? Get ready. What if I don't pass one of them? What if I have to have this class for my major? Like if I don't pass this class, Literally, the student had gone from 0 to living under a bridge in Tempe in about 10 seconds, right? Just based off of a scenario of what if. And so I know that you've been guilty, because I have, of creating these storylines that a lot of times never even come to fruition. In fact, Mark Twain had a great quote along the lines where he said that most of the tragedies that have occurred in our lives are those we've made up. Isn't that so true? And so we have to be aware, are we getting into these maladaptive thought patterns that are hijacking our present moment, where we're going to be happiest and where we're most productive? So the whole game in mindfulness and meditative practices is that we're weakening neural connections to rumination and projection, and we're strengthening neural connections to the here and now. So, well, how do we do it? Why do it's important? What do we do? I mean, this sounds glorious, right? Well, we have to train the brain, just like anything. If you're going to get in shape, can you just sit on your couch and eat Doritos and watch Netflix? No, like you have to have a plan. You have to have some cardio and maybe some strength training and really kind of watch your nutrition. Same thing happens with the brain. You have to work on the brain to get it to start rewiring these neural connections in order to look at the world a little bit differently. So we've all been here, right? That perfect moment you're about to take a picture with your selfie. Life is under control, and life is no longer under control. Right? And I know you've done this. You said to yourself, my life will be so much easier when I finish this class. Oh my gosh, my life will be so much easier when I get through this test or I finish this paper. We've all said this. Is life that much easier? It is not. So again, we have to come back and look at the brain. And this is a really simplistic model. We're looking at 3 major regions. The reptilian is your brainstem. It's autonomic features like heart rate and respiration. Limbic is going to be emotional regulation, and neocortex is critical thinking. So it says where it says mammalian, that's your limbic. When we have balance between all 3, between your reptilian, your brainstem, your limbic, and your neocortex, your nervous system's in something called rest and digest. And it's when you're really responsive. It means that your immune system's working really beautifully. You're digesting all your food. You're able to sleep really well. These are all things we want to be in. And so this is a beautiful system for the body as far as a repair. But there's something just as important, and it's called sympathetic. Now, I want you to look at something. When you're in parasympathetic, remember the neocortex, the mammalian brain, which is limbic, and the reptilian brain, which is the brainstem, they all talk to one another. But when you go into fight or flight, we actually disconnect the neocortex and we go into this really primitive loop between the limbic and the brainstem. This is important because if you walked out of your home today or wherever you're at and there were a horde of zombies, does your brain want you to be like, I got to text my friend and figure out, like, why are there zombies here today? There shouldn't be, and then the zombies eat you, right? Like, what's your brain want you to do? It wants you to run. It wants you to get away from the threat. And once you're safe, you come back to homeostasis, and then you can process what was going on. It's also interesting. Look at the 2 systems that get put on the back burner. Not only are you disconnecting your critical thinking, but your immune system and digestive system, which are not needed for immediate survival, they get put on the back burner because, again, we don't need those right away. Now, this is a beautiful system if you are actually in danger. So if you're being chased by a T-Rex, you need to go into fight or flight. But if it is just life, if you are overwhelmed with school, with your family, with relationships, with money, then you really need to step back and say, gosh, do I want to chronically be walking around where my neocortex, think about this, my critical thinking's disengaged and my digestive and immune system can't do the job that they're doing? In fact, the CDC estimates that 80% of visits to primary care physicians are for stress-related complaints and disorders. I'm sick all the time. I'm not sleeping. I've got headaches. I've got diarrhea. I'm constipated. And so we realize again how integrated the body actually is. So again, stress, it's not good. It's not bad. It's life. And it's really important to recognize that stress is really good for us. It's just you need to learn to control it versus it controlling you. So how do we do it? Well, there's a couple of ways. We can look at our breath work, and we can use our informal breath, meaning that when we realize we're being triggered and something's kind of getting us upset, whether you have test anxiety, which, think about it, test anxiety is going to disconnect that neocortex. Some simple breathing will help realign the brain. In fact, clinically, we know it's the fastest way to self-regulate the nervous system. So what do? You encounter something kind of hard. Let's say, for example, the box breath. you encounter, you're about to take a test, your heart is racing, you're breathing really heavy, you feel kind of nauseated. And it's interesting because we're in that test anxiety mode. We've disconnected our neocortex. We're not accessing those neural connections of what we've studied. So in order to get that alignment back in the brain, we just do something simple like breathing. We do a big inhale through the nose. When I do that, I trigger the vagus nerve. That's a nerve that innervates all these other nerves in the body. I pause and then I exhale. That simple movement, pause, triggering the vagus nerve, interfaces with the parasympathetic nervous system, and it calms it down. That's why we tell people to breathe when they're having a panic attack. That's why we use breathing for pain management. It's a beautiful way for you to get your brain back into alignment. But the magic really happens when you take 10 minutes a day, 10 to 15 minutes, and you practice some type of meditative practice that trains the brain to be present. Meditation's obviously very popular. There's a lot of different apps that are out there, a lot of apps that are completely free for students, and a lot of free meditations on YouTube. When we look at this, the data shown us that as little as 3 weeks of 10 minutes a day literally changes the brain, meaning that the neocortex becomes thicker, so you're more focused and responsive. And in the limbic region, there's something called the amygdala. It actually shrinks. It's that gatekeeper to fear and anxiety. So you're less fearful, less reactive. And something else in the limbic region called the hippocampus, it's for memory and learning. It actually gets larger, so you perform better academically. And so we look at this and we're changing the morphology of the brain, meaning what's happening is that we literally have changed the way the brain perceives the world. That's neuroplasticity. So you can achieve this by doing a meditation like Headspace, where you take 10 to 15 minutes and you just go through. And again, it's all we're doing is we're training the brain to be present, strengthen neural connections to here and now. You could do it via your body. A lot of the first responders I work with have something called PTSD or moral injury. And so they have a really hard time just sitting and meditating. So they'll do yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong in order to calm the mind down. In fact, I'm having all my classes meet me today at Sun Devil Fitness as we go through and look at the different Tai Chi and yoga classes that are available for them to take to help self-regulate. And so it's a beautiful moving or somatic exercise. It's a way, again, that we're training the brain to be present. We can do it via art. And again, anything where we're just engaged in this moment, and we're not getting lost in the future or the past. And so you could color, you could do photography, you could do mindful cooking where you make beautiful food art. Really, you could journal, which is another really powerful one. And you can use art as you're journaling. And that's a nice way to kind of look back and kind of see what are the emotions that you're feeling. In fact, a really cool study came out showing that when people woke up first thing in the morning, if they just wrote down 5 things that they are grateful for and then reread them before they went to bed, they did it for 3 weeks. They were happier 6 months post than groups that didn't do anything at all. I mean, how simple is that? And then finally, you can focus on your senses. And focusing on your senses really, it forces the brain to be present, because the minute that you engage sight, touch, smell, taste, or hear, you're gathering data from the surrounding environment to make sure that you're safe. And so you can't be lost in the future or the past. And that's why if you ever go through a lot of different types of therapies, if you get into maladaptive thought patterns, they'll tell you, hey, stop and say, what are 5 things that I see? What are 4 things that I feel? What are 3 things that I hear? What are 2 things that I smell? And you can either do what's 1 thing I taste or what's 1 emotion that I'm experiencing. And it's a beautiful way to pull the brain back to the here and now. And finally, gratitude. You know what I mean? What's good in your life? We are so quick to look at the challenges and the negatives, yet not the blessings. I mean, just waking up in the morning is a gift. And so gratitude's another beautiful way to say, well, you know, what's good? Well, what's good? I woke up. I have strong legs that carry me through my day. I have a family that loves me. Hey, I get to listen to this really cool webinar, right? And so it's finding these little things in life, because truly, my friends, it is the journey. It is not the destination. Because bottom line, mindfulness is a choice. It's a choice to do something, or it's a choice to do nothing. Great quote by Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that space is our power to choose our response. And our response lies our growth and our freedom. We are empowered. We have the ability to move forward, to look at stress and look at challenges as opportunities for growth. We don't have to let them hinder us. Remember, you are your greatest advocate. You are your greatest friend. You are your greatest love story. And here's my email. Take a picture of it. If you ever have questions, listen, I'm here for you. This is my ultimate pay it forward to society. And so any way I can help you or answer questions, or if you're even considering coming to one of the universities, maybe I can direct you to where you need to go if you can't find the information that you need. But I really, really appreciate you being willing to listen to my little spill today. And I think we have, let's see, okay, just about right, our Q&A section. So do I get it here now? Like that? Stop share. Let's see. Stop share. There we go.
And there we are.
Okay.
The magic of
The magic of
technology.
technology. Okay, so what do we have any questions? I hope you guys ask me questions.
We do have a few questions.
Okay, good.
So,
Okay, good.
so besides meditation and
Mhm.
breathing exercises
Mhm.
and think about all those other great resources, what are some other like really quick things that we can do in our
Oh,
lives?
you guys, you can be mindful anywhere. And really, that's the goal. Is you want to integrate this organically. You don't want to make it, oh, I have to do something in addition to. It's just part of. It's like when you're having a great conversation with your best friend or a good friend, instead of thinking about when they're talking to you and thinking about the response, you could just really listen to them, pause, and then respond, right? Because if we're thinking about a response, we're not really being mindful and we're not really listening to them. It can be when you are walking between classes or you're walking to school or you're just walking to the store, just stopping and saying, well, how does it feel as my feet hit the pavement? What do I smell? What do I see? Just engaging the senses. You can be mindful anywhere. The goal is, and I love this question, you have to figure out what connects with you because it's really personal. Once you figure out what you like to do, then you do it and it becomes a habit and it becomes just a part of who you are, not something in addition. So mindfulness can happen anywhere.
That's great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
So another question we had was, where can I find some free resources about mindfulness?
That's a good question. And honestly, there is so much out there actually. There is mindfulschools.org that actually has a lot of different resources that are available if you just go to YouTube. And also, and I'm going to send this to these guys. My husband's so wonderful because I do a lot of speaking gigs out in the community, and he's created a website for me called thinkjamie.com, where I put a bunch of TED Talks and meditations and articles and books that I like all on just one area. It's just a resource page.
Great. That sounds
I
fabulous.
will. I'll share it to you
Oh,
so you
yeah,
guys can
that
share
sounds
it.
fabulous. Yes. And after this live webinar, it does become an on-demand webinar. So all the resources that you're going to be sharing today will be part of that. So
Beautiful.
we are
Beautiful.
good.
Beautiful.
Another question we had was, how does learning about mindfulness connect to my future career?
Oh my gosh. My friends, if you can nail this down now, I mean, think about it. To be able to approach anything, and when we move on in life just gets, I tell my undergraduate students all the time, because someone will say to me, they're in engineering and they're very stressed out, and they'll like, I will get balance when I graduate. And I'm like, oh, you will not, right? Because you have to start figuring out where's your balance now. Life just gets more complicated as we move forward. This is so important. Sometimes in this society, we're very extrinsically driven and we think that self-care is selfish, right? We put it on a back burner, yet the reality is we can't give what we don't have. The minute we really start practicing this, we become really responsive in our lives. We learn who we are and we approach the world non-judgmentally, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you self-judge, guess what you do with the people and situations around you? You judge them. It's just what we don't process, we project. You've got to remember that. So being able to say, I know who I am, this perfectly imperfect human being. I'm aware of all my emotions. It gives you a leg up as you move forward personally and professionally, no matter what you are doing.
That's a great answer. And we have a lot of other great questions. So what if you feel like you can't calm your mind while you're meditating?
You're not
I know
supposed
I've
to.
had that.
That's such a great question. A lot of my students will go like, oh, I'm the worst meditator on the planet because I'm supposed to have this totally quiet mind. That's not how it works. Your mind will never be totally quiet. Welcome to humanity. The goal here is that you recognize thoughts and you catch them before they become storylines. It's almost like you have a puppy, and I know you've all seen a puppy and they're so adorable. Imagine a puppy is your thoughts. When you put that puppy down next to you the first time, does the puppy just stay there? Of course not. The puppy wanders, just like your thoughts will wander, because it is the nature of the puppy. It is the nature of your thoughts. So what do? Because it's a puppy and you know it's its nature, you're kind, you're like, oh, you're so cute, come over here. And you pick it up and you bring it back. Do the same thing with your thoughts. You have a thought, you're like, oh, you're just adorable. Let me come back to my breath, right? Let the thought go. And so the more we do it, the more we train that puppy to stay by us, the longer it starts to stay, but it's still going to wander. Same thing with your mind. It's just you catching the wanderings before their storylines. That's it.
Great. And here's a teacher-based question.
Oh, I love teacher-based questions. Yes.
What should I do if a student is causing drama in my sixth grade class? And how should I handle it?
Isn't that awesome? I like I said, I taught for years and years before this. One of the biggest things you can do as an educator is you model this. In fact, I was a teacher of the year for the state in 2010. And when they had that professional crew came in, I was thinking, oh, they're going to talk so much about, like they learned so much in the integumentary system or about mitosis or meiosis. And not one student talked about the curriculum. They talked about the relationships that we forged, that I left the class a better person than I came into it. When I hit hard moments, I would ask myself, what would Mrs. V do? And the thing is you model it. You're incredibly responsive. They would know there'd be moments I'd say, listen, I need to take a breath, or I'd have them do some breathing before they do assessments. And we would talk about what happens when we're starting to get angry or frustrated, how it's really easy to disconnect that neocortex and become reactive. But primarily, it's modeling it. It's kindness, it's compassion. It's saying it's okay to not be okay sometimes, but also it's not okay, right, to be disrupting. And so I think the kindness and the understanding, the empathy help. And I think just if you start integrating this into the classroom, because I did Mindful Mondays, Thoughtful Tuesdays, and talked about how it affects us both psychologically and physiologically, it makes a huge difference. Like definitely check out mindfulschools.org.
Love it. That's another great answer. If you are feeling very stressed and like you can't calm down, is it okay to talk to someone like a counselor?
Well, yes, right. And even if you are calmed down, right, and you're still having a lot of moments, definitely. The beautiful thing about talking with the counselor is that it's an objective person to process with. They're not going to here's the deal. They're not going to solve your problems. What they're going to do is allow you to get a little bit more self-reflective in a safe space in order to really look at what is the core, the root that's causing these more challenging emotions. So absolutely, you talk with, and I can't even tell you how many times I walk my own students personally over to counseling, and then they tell me how much it's been really helping them.
All right. And then next, what are some kinds of things that can lead to depression?
Well, just life, right? Have we noticed that? I mean, this is a chaotic world. This is hard. It was really hard. Things that can lead to depression, obviously family life dynamics, right? Having issues going on there, feeling overwhelmed at school, looking at social media and just assuming this is the way life is supposed to be. And let me just tell you, I just had a student actually say to me, Professor, I don't think life's supposed to be this hard. And I'm like, oh, my little friend, yes, it is. Like, that's the beauty of it. It's the ups and the downs. Of course, it's supposed to be hard. It's your arsenal or toolbox of responsive behaviors that help you navigate the hard. The hard doesn't go away, just like the stress doesn't go away. There are a lot of things that can cause depression. But what we want to look at is really step back and look at lifestyle and say, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting good nutrition? Am I getting good movement? We know those three are foundational. And then what am I doing to train my brain? What am I doing for my brain's sake? And if you're integrating all of this and then maybe seeing a counselor, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, having someone to talk to, support systems are huge.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I think we are right on time. So that worked out perfect. We were able to
Great.
answer all the questions. So thank you so much to Jamie for being here today.
You're so welcome.
And we would love to see you at our next webinar on
Absolutely.
February 28th.
Okay. And you all keep breathing. Okay. I can't track you down, but I expect you to be breathing. Okay.
Thank you so much.